Dear participants, welcome you all. This is the upcoming event of the Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I am Tamás, Baranyi, Deputy Director for Strategy of this institute. Our guest today is His Excellency Yacov Hadas-Handelsman, the Ambassador of the State of Israel to Hungary. At this event, we are going to talk about the common challenges facing Israel and Europe, especially in the wake of the Covid-19 pandemic crisis. Israel's handling of the pandemic is exemplary in many ways, because in spite of the relatively high level of morbidity or the spread of the virus, the mortality rates remain spectacularly low, and this is a wonderful achievement. Israel is pretty different country from any other, yet it has similarities with our own country in terms of size and in terms of number of population. So I really believe that the Israeli example has an immense value for both of Europe and of Hungary. So we are looking forward with great expectation to hear the take of Ambassador of this response and about all the other challenges. As for the format, His Excellency is going to talk about for roughly 45 minutes, and after it will be followed by a roughly 30 minutes Q&A session. Please note that we are accepting questions via chat, and please address those questions directly to the host. And so the Q&A sessions, I can myself raise them. So I think without further ado, let me just join me in welcoming His Excellency, Mr. Yacov Hadas-Handelsman, and dear Ambassador. The virtual floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baranyi, and good afternoon. It's a real pleasure for me to be here as, giving you a lecture or talking to you about the prospects from Israeli eyes on the Middle East and Europe in the light of the coronavirus. I must say, first of all, it's the first time that I am running a lecture through this media. I hope, there are the advantages and disadvantages. For me, the biggest disadvantage is the fact that I cannot see all the participants and there is no personal and eye contact, of course. But doesn't matter. As we say, beggars can't be too choosy. That's what we have. We should be thankful for this, and we can try and continue our lives. Because, ladies and gentlemen, our lives were interrupted by this virus. Now, I have some insights about it, and if I may, I'll say a few words about the situation in Israel, and then we can go on to what the thoughts and ideas I prepared, and as I will be saying also afterwards, I think that in the entire world we still have many more questions than answers. And not only, but also some of the answers which are valid for today are not valid for next week. I say it also based on the fact that today I saw in one of the Israeli website about the international research. It seems to be a quite knowledgeable research and serious research, which observed that after 11 days, the presence or the effectivity of the virus drops sharply. So I saw it as well, which means that you can save with people being hospitalized. We can say you don't need to wait for this two tests to test negative and so on. People can go home because it's clear now. And this is something that until yesterday, or until today, or until whatever, nobody knew about it. Nobody thought. People thought, no, you cannot skip these two tests, and you have to wait. And sometimes the tests are the wrong test, and especially the more tests you conduct, the bigger mayhem. the bigger chances to be mistaken. And I'm talking from the Israeli experience because we made mistakes. We still make mistakes, even today. We tested the teacher positive. The whole class was sent for home quarantine. And after 2 days, it happened to be, it was found that it was a mistake. So, and things like this. But anyway, you mentioned the situation in Israel. Yeah, well, we are going now back to normality, and especially when we are facing Pentecost, the Jewish one, which coincides also with the Christian one. And we feel that we have to compensate ourselves for Passover, that it's a symbol of a family a gathering for 7 weeks, and we had to 7 days, sorry, and we had to celebrate it on our own. So what happened in Israel is that, first of all, we identified the threat quickly. We were lucky to have some time to prepare ourselves. We took some very decisive and painful decisions, like the decision to close our skies to air traffic from several countries, because, as you know, the vast majority of traffic into and outside of Israel is by air or sea and not by land. And we were the first, or I think that we were the first in Europe to close our skies to flights coming from Italy. It started with Milano, and then it spread to the entire of Italy. And the Italians, I can still remember, Italians were very cross with us about it. They summoned the Israeli ambassador, my colleague in Rome, to reprimand him and protest, how dare we do this kind of things to them. But we said, sorry, I mean, this is the decision. We are aware of the danger, and that's what we did. And we never looked backward. And then came China. Oh no, China came first, and then came Italy. Italy the first in Europe. And then we widened it in Europe to the 6 countries, which were the most affected countries, and so on. The Prime Minister decided to bring the entire Israeli economy to a standstill. Certain stages, only about 15% of the workforce in the industry was operating. You can call it, in a way, shock therapy. Shock therapy to the effect not that you hit the people, but that you hit the reality. And actually by doing so, you hit the virus. So this is the situation which existed in Israel. For the first time ever, I think we had to introduce curfew in Israel. Curfew because, or some kind of closure, because we wanted to curtail the locations where the virus was spreading, and we wanted to prevent people from moving from one place to the other. So we had some draconic measures introduced. By the way, in our case, the constitutional situation was even more complicated because we didn't have, most of the time, we did not have a sitting parliament, because it was before and after elections. So the government, which is an interim government or was a transition government, had to take decisions that could not have been not only approved, but also scrutinized by the legislative organ of the country. And there was a lot of criticism, but this was the problem. I mean, that was the reality. Why am I mentioning this? Because we also took some very, you can say, draconic measures, to the extent that our system was not, for our system, it was not sufficient that someone complains about the syndromes. He takes the test, and then if he's found positive, then you can say, okay, Mr. X, or he is infected, either passive or active, and that's it. Our system, our assumption was that if someone is infected, and if someone, and if the period is usually 14 days between the time someone was infected and it erupts, or you can see the syndrome, or prove it, then he could be infecting other people in the time past. And now you have to go back and see where was he. So we started with questioning people about their whereabouts in the week or 2 weeks prior to this. It was not, I mean, it was useful, a useful mean as long as you have tens of people or hundreds of people. But once you get thousands, it's not useful anymore. And then we went to introduce electronic measures of tracking people. We'll not go into details. There are the possibilities. There are tracking systems that could, if you give them your cellular phone number, they could in a way tell you who was in the proximity of your smartphone over the last the fixed period of time. Because the fact that you tell someone, look, I was in terminal X in airport Y on day A between between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there were hundreds of people there. But if you go backwards and track the electromagnetic signals of your smartphone, you can find out with which other electromagnetic frequencies there was an interaction. There is an interaction. I don't want to go into details. I don't understand it too much. There is always an interaction between two cellular phones or when they are in a proximity, even if they are not working. You don't have to talk to someone in order that it will be evident that your phones were hooked together. Anyway, this enabled us, first of all, to track as many people as possible for testing them. So the mere fact that someone was in the vicinity of someone that it was proven that he was infected, got you to get a text message which said, we're sorry to inform you that this and this and this happened. You should go immediately into a self-quarantine at home, and our emergency services will call you, and they will fix a date that they will come and take and test you. So this is the way we ended up with almost 17,000 people who were infected. 17,000 people who were infected. Most of them were passive, but it makes sure it allows us to be guaranteed that there are not any surprises, hidden surprises that we don't know about. That somewhere there is a huge community of people who were infected. Because statistically, if you test only those, if you deal only those who complain, then as you said, even Prime Minister Orban said several times that the real figure could be as 10 times higher than the figures that we know. Now, in hindsight of 2 months after, you know that it's not true. Because had it been even 3 times bigger, you would have known it. But this you could not have known at the time. So let us not say in hindsight there was no point in doing those tests. We came to a situation where we conducted about 20,000 tests per day, and we could, and the aim was and still is to be in a position to conduct over 30,000 a day. It's a lot for Israel. We were the second place per capita in the world, I think, after Korea, even more than Korea, but after another country, maybe Germany. We were doing it like hell. So, and I will elaborate about all the difficulties, which are the direct subject of or the direct part of my presentation. So, in any case, the combination of this kind of scrutiny, which also, by the way, enabled us to conclude in which particular areas there was a concentration of infected people, or would be. There are those kind of applications, of software. I don't want to go into it. It enabled us to isolate places. We started by closing down, a closure on an entire city. Then we became more accurate as more data poured in. We became more accurate, and we were in a position to close certain neighborhoods in a city. Let's say if you go to Budapest, let's say you decide to close not only district, let's say District 5, but to close certain streets on District 5, to isolate the population there, which means that all the other people, even in District 5, in the 5th district of Budapest, could continue their lives almost as normal, but on the other hand, the others will be closed. Now, when you close people, you need to assist them. You need to help them with food, medicine, whatever they need, and especially that in the middle, we had our holidays, the Passover. So we have introduced the army. First time, Israeli army, we have the home command, which usually deals with catastrophes like an earthquake, a mega terror attack where buildings collapse and so on. This time, they had a more pleasant job, not to evacuate the death and so on, but to give medicine, to help people. It created an unthinkable social phenomena in Israeli reality, because the two most sensible segments of Israeli society, the ultra-Orthodox and the Arab population, who were in a threat because the fact that they have big families and they live in small places, and they don't like, usually in ordinary days, they don't like the Israeli armies because of we don't want to go into it. Suddenly, the IDF became the savior, and one had to pinch sometimes the skin to realize that one was not dreaming, because to see the way they were welcomed everywhere. But you need the army. You cannot have the run normal lives, because you need army. You need to recruit reserves, and to do it. Now, sometimes when you are small enough, you are flexible enough, and you are capable of doing things that bigger countries, that our countries cannot do. You know, giants, sometimes they have problems. It's like, you know, the difference between a commando speedboat and an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carrier, when they have to change course, it takes them time. When a speedboat or commando speedboat the Zodiac has to change course, it's within 1 second and it's off. Anyway, this brought us to a situation where we managed to crash the curve, and now we are coming out slowly but surely. The main problem that we still have is that, unlike the Hungarian public, the Israelis are very undisciplined. And here it plays a role. As an observer, what my impression here was that the people here were very careful. They were concerned. The government didn't need to convince them or to threaten them. The government said, you know, this, and that's what they did. In Israel, it's like an army is charging uphill, and the commanders have to look back from time to time backwards to make sure that, you know, the soldiers are following them and they haven't gone somewhere else. In our case, we're not in war, but that's a nice image. The government had to pull people, because otherwise they would have scattered everywhere. And this is our problem. And this is the main concern now in Israel, that people think that, okay, it's over, we know better, and social distancing is still important, mask is still important, it's a compulsory, and we do the things the way we would like to do. Now, so this explains the Israeli story, but which is quite similar to the Hungarian, as I said, with several differences, but the main difference is the public. The target audience is the public, because everything is being done for the safety of the people, right? So in our case, we have to fight the people in order to bring them under the, you know, to bring them in order. In your case, it's okay, and this is a one headache less for any politician or for any government. Now, The first thing that we can say about coming to the wider angle of this issue is that a lot has been written and said about the coronavirus, and maybe this is an understatement, but still, as I said, more questions than answers, and I think it will remain like this. Now, it is an unprecedented situation of its kind, in my humble view, in the last century, and actually, if we go back in time, since the Spanish flu, it's the first worldwide crisis that is not directly connected to a political dispute or to an or to the economy. It is something which is related to health, and yet it manages to bring our ordinary all day lives into disruption. So this is something that should be taken into consideration. Now, if we talk about time scale, again, there are ups and downs. We always think, okay, we are approaching towards the end, but it's not. Only to find out the next day that it is not. Let me remind you a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. It started somewhere in the second half of December in China. I mean, I say somewhere because it could have started even earlier, but we don't know. We do know that on the second half of December, there came the first reports for China about this SARS-like epidemic and so on. Then it spread in Southeast Asia. Then at end of February, beginning of March, we find it suddenly in Europe, starting with Italy, and then the Middle East, and then North America. I mean, in the United States and Canada. And then after 2 months or 2.5 months, when we think that it's okay, we managed to contain it, we suddenly find it that it's erupting in Latin America and in Africa. Now, Africa, it's always there, but Africa, nobody cares because Africa is the forgotten continent. What can we say? It's realpolitik. Okay? Nobody cares too much about Africa, especially not about the sub-Saharan. I'm sorry, but that's reality. Sorry. But Latin America, Brazil, now you have Chile. It's a problem. So if someone would have said until 2 weeks ago that maybe we are at the end of part 1 of the phenomena, I beg to differ, and in my humble opinion, the most we can say now that here we are maybe at the end of chapter 1, but not part 1. The next point I wanted to mention that there are a lot of paradoxes. And the main one, the main one is the fact that on the one hand, it is perfectly clear that globalization is one of the major reasons, if not the reason, for the virus and its worldwide spreading in general and the speed of it in particular. Because someone was in Wow province today to take a flight around the globe, let's say to somewhere in Europe, with some stopovers. So he is here, he is there, and the virus is everywhere. And this is actually what happened. Let me remind you, even in this country, Iranians who came from China to Iran spread it in Iran. Lebanese pilgrims who were in Iran, in the holy city, went back and spread it in Lebanon. And even in this country, to the best of my knowledge, what from the media, the first one who imported the disease were these 2 Iranian students who came back from Iran, where they spent the holidays. It's just like this, and you have it everywhere. So this is some kind of a setback for globalization. And to this, we need to add another fact which will have an impact on our daily life from now on, all of us, Hungary, Israel, name a country and it's the same. We were facing a lot of problems in securing enough equipment needed to protect ourselves and combat the virus. Everybody is talking about ventilation machines, which is the most, it was the most desirable commodity. And you know, we talk about a commodity which could reach the price of tens of thousands of US dollars per unit. And 1 unit is per person, usually. We came to a situation where a shipment of ventilators was on its way from somewhere in the Arab Gulf to Israel via Frankfurt in Germany. The moment it arrived to Germany, to Frankfurt, to the airport, and our representatives wanted to make sure that it is going to be boarded on the right aircraft to Tel Aviv, they were disappointed to hear that the dispatcher at the Frankfurt airport told them, listen, we know this shipment, but this shipment is going somewhere else. And then they found out, and someone was ready to pay double as we were ready to pay, or as we already paid, by the way, and it disappeared. Someone, another country purchased it. So suddenly you have some kind of a economic / political fight for equipment that you need. And needless to say that, you know, countries were lacking masks. Now, why am I going into all these details? Because first of all, it's apart from the shock and the panic it creates when you need to find to combat the disease, you realize suddenly that you are too much heavily dependent on other countries, and in particular one country. And you know, we all know the name of this country, because also this country enjoyed, as all other countries, from the huge industrial capabilities of China that provided all of us, sometimes as a charity or as aid, sometimes for money, all the equipment needed. We came into a situation in Israel where we could not conduct all the tests that we want, the amount of tests we wanted to conduct, even though we had enough kits. Why? Because the chemical material which you use in order to test, let's say that's like the lakmus paper for this specific test, we were short of this. Now, these are chemicals that nobody heard about, apart from biologists, epidemiologists, you know, people who are in this branch. Nobody knows what the hell we are talking about. Suddenly, it became a first-class commodity. And in Israel, there was a lot of criticism against the government. How come? How come? How come? You promised, you promised, you promised. And then criticism even increased when it was found out that until not too many years ago, there was a small factory in Israel which was manufacturing this kind of material for the purpose of chemical and biological experiments. But then they found out that it was far too expensive to manufacture it in Israel, whereas you could buy it for nothing in Israeli yardsticks in China. So of course, company closes, factory closes down, and Ministry of Health says, okay, we can rely on China to buy it from China, and if not, then there's always a backup, and the backup is in Germany. It's not that cheap, but it's not, you know, it could be a better quality, but we can buy there. There's no need to have a factory. I'm sure that for all the distinguished people that are listening to me, I'm not breaking any news that you haven't heard about from your own experience in your own places, in country, or whatever. It's the same. That's globalization. Now, by the way, we are going to renew manufacturing of these materials in Israel. Now we are going to renew the production of lots of things that we stopped doing years ago because it was not economical. And nobody wants to subsidize this, but then you see it all over the world, because, by the way, the Chinese couldn't supply us the material because they were fully booked, and the Germans as well. So now you need to stop being dependent on others and start being depending on yourself. And this is another lesson that doesn't matter what will happen. This is going to create a setback. So to globalization. So on the one hand, this is globalization, and globalization brought us to this issue, to this problem, and therefore there will be a setback. But on the other hand, the only way for us today to combat the disease is by joint efforts. Because, and look what's happening now, let's take Hungary and all the negotiations which is taking on about renewing the movement of the freedom of movement, which is one of the pillars of the EU, freedom of movement, not within inside the EU, but among several countries in the EU. You need to have this and this and this and that. Now, you want to go to cross the border to Bratislava, and it's like preparing for a journey, on a steamer to the other side of the world 100 years ago. Something that until several months ago, there is a whole generation in Europe which was born and grew up that doesn't know the meaning of borders, of controls and things like this. But this is going to be reintroduced. Now, we don't know what's going to happen, but the basic assumption is that what the world is going to change. The world that we have known is going to change. The question is only whether it's going to change permanently, or is it going to come back. I tend to think, with the way I look at things, I'm optimistic, and I think that this is going to go back. I mean, it won't be the same, but it's inevitable that the world will have to come back to the way it used to be before. Because it's easy to say now we'll have to act in a different way. It always reminds me all these ideas about climate change and sustainability, and all those calls, let's not fly anymore, let's not do this, let's not do that. Come on, people have to fly because they have to work. The economy must be run. I mean, high tech, whatever. You cannot say, we don't fly anymore. We go by an environmental friendly aircraft, or there isn't such a thing, but by a yacht, for example. That's nice for publicity. You cannot mobilize and move the masses by this kind of means, and you cannot make them sit at home. The days that people could be born in a tiny place and spend their entire life there is over. So, and another thing, another paradox that I would like to speak briefly, because it's very relevant to the Middle East. In many cases, as a result of the sense of emergency, countries have decided to shorten or to shrink or to limit the freedom of people. I don't want to go into details about what was the whole criticism about Hungary and so on, but other countries as well. You say, okay, for 1 month, I introduce emergency regulations and so on. In the Arab world, I think that the opposite phenomena existed. In the Arab world, suddenly the rulers or the regimes became aware of the situation of the health situation of the individual, where in a place the individual usually do not count. What counts are the elite. Why? Two things. Because first of all, they realized that the world was watching them. Second, they realized that in this case, where you have this kind of pandemia, the well-being of your servant has a crucial influence, or could have a crucial influence on your own well-being. Either you get rid of the servant, which you cannot, or you have to make sure that he's well treated, that he's been given all the possibilities. Otherwise, he will infect you, because as we know, viruses do not recognize any borders, boundaries, territories. We can say, and here I want to say a few words about the way we see things officially in the ministry. We have this Bureau for Policy Planning, and they have a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, and they managed to put some of them in writing. Just want to go briefly over it to mention how does it look from the Israeli perspective. So first of all, We have opportunities here, especially technological. And for Israel as a startup nation, of course, sky is the limit when it comes to this kind of developments. And this is targeted first and foremost to the developed world, which means in our point of view, it's the OECD countries. And there are a lot of prospects for us. We are already doing some things which we didn't do before, even with Hungary and so on. On the other hand, in the Middle East, we might be facing more threats, and actually Europe might be facing more threats as well, because instability in the Middle East decreases. If you take Iran as a country which destabilizes the situation here in Israel or in Europe, you have a problem, because today Iran has lots of problems. Mainly the fact that the corona and many people were affected, and even the public in Iran is not ready to put up anymore before it's happening. And adding to it, the fact that in an area which up until now, the bigger part of its economy is energy-based economy, which means oil and gas, and taking into consideration the sharp decrease in prices of oil, less gas, but mainly oil, it also creates a problem. If I just mention one example, you take a country like Iraq. Iraq lost within this few weeks 75% of its income, because 95% of the income is oil royalties. And nobody buys oil. I mean, look, the price of an oil barrel plunged into a one-digit figure. Unbelievable. Not too many years ago, people were prognosing that the price will be $120, $140. Now it was less than $10. Okay, so now there's always you have to correct the changes. Now it's about 30 something, but it's still nothing. And for those countries, unlike our countries, which are dependent on completely other sources. So this is another element that you and us, I mean, Europe and Israel have to come to take into consideration. And again, the volume or the dimension of this economic crisis will dictate or might dictate political moves, both in Europe and Israel and in the Middle East, because they need it. Another aspect is the dimension of the health crisis. Again, this is something which is unprecedented. We managed to the first round. We look at it as the first round. First round, we managed to do it, and to do it in a way, in a successful way. But nobody knows what's going to happen. What we also see that it's already happening, and again, it has its impact on Europe and on Israel and the Middle East. But let's talk about Europe and Israel, Hungary and Israel, is the relationship between the superpowers. Now we're talking actually about two superpowers, the United States or China. The rift between the two is getting bigger and bigger from day to day. President Trump keeps blaming China for trying to hide, to delay the transfer of information to the West, by betraying United Nations principles, and by this causing the deaths. You know, the United States, yesterday, they crossed the mark of 100,000 people dead. Can you imagine 100,000 people dead? And it's still growing. Look what happened in New York. Unbelievable. And you know, people have the tendency to put when you are helpless, you put sometimes you try and put the blame on other people. In this case, one could have expected people to come and say, it's Trump, he is not reliable. Because Trump, he says that he drinks he drinks bleach and things like this. It's not very reliable. But ladies and gentlemen, in this case, you have this, how do you call it? I always forget the name of this, the intelligence forum of Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Britain, and the United States. How do you call it?
It's 5 years.
The 5
years.
Yes. They came out with a very, very clear conclusion, which actually ratifies whatever Trump was saying, accusing them publicly, and by the way, in a way, also intensifies those accusations. So when the Australians and the Canadians are saying it, even those who don't trust Trump should treat it very seriously, because it's not Trump anymore. It's the others, and they are reliable for some people. And it's serious. So relations between the two were not at their best, and this is an understatement even before the crisis, and we don't want to go into it, but now this is going also, this kind of escalation is going also to have its own influence on us all, because we are all dependent on, I want to be dependent on the United States. By the way, I can tell you, it's an open secret. You can see it also now with Israel. There was a bid in Israel to construct a huge desalination facility on the Israeli beach. It's the biggest of its kind worldwide. And there was a bid, and there was a Chinese company which had very good chances to win this bid. And the Americans said, you are free, you are friends, best friends, whatever you do, you do. Think about it. Now, luckily enough, they didn't, and the Chinese company did not win. It was another company which won. I don't even know if it's American or not. But it's a problem today for all of us. And actually, I want to leave time for discussion. And the only thing that I would like to end up is with, I want to say something about our neighborhood. Well, I cannot unfortunately break out the news that peace has broke out between Israel and the Palestinians, but at least cooperation. Because again, when you have two neighbors, it doesn't matter, no matter what are the rifts between them, but they realize that we breathe the same air, we live in the same place. It has been now for years that it is not that we haven't been witnessing such kind of cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And also in a way, we know Gaza is being controlled by Hamas, and Hamas is a terror organization, but nevertheless, there is a cooperation also with them, because nobody has an interest to see a massive infection erupting in either place, because again, it affects us. The same goes for Jordan and our other neighbors. Thank you very much. I hope I was not boring you too much, and then let's open the floor for whatever you want to ask and discuss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. It was quite the opposite. It was very thought-provoking and straightforward. Thank you very much for it. And now jump to the Q&A session. I'm picking from the questions that I've received during your speech as a host. And the first two are inquiring strict, tighter relationship between your country and our region, either as in a V4 format or in Europe. So the first question is, what possibilities do you see of enhancing, furthering the cooperation between the four countries and Israel, especially in the situation that is unfolding now? And the second is inquiring your take on the future of EU-Israeli relations, maybe even to a future EU membership. So that's the second question. I presented it because I thought they are similar. So do you see the questions?
I know I saw, but during when I was speaking, but the problem is that you have I know your voice doesn't sound too well on, but I think that I managed to gather it. Yes, first of all, about Israel, Hungary, Israel V4. Yes, there is cooperation. As a matter of fact, when the crisis started, both prime ministers had a video conference. Israel, Netanyahu and Orban had a very long conversation on the VTC, which resulted also in a wider range of consultations with like-minded countries like Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, Italy, and we are in constant contact. We have almost on a weekly basis a VTC between the Israeli team in charge on dealing with it at our National Security Council and the Hungarian team. We compare notes. We come with several offers and bids and ideas. One of them is already to be seen in a place in Vats. There is an Israeli high-tech company called Celitron, that they deal with medical equipment, sophisticated medical equipment. Now they are manufacturing here a very sophisticated and advanced ventilation machine. It's an Israeli innovation, and the guy brought it. It's a corporation, Israeli-Hungarian. They manufacture it here in Vats. So, and there is more to come. This kind of cooperation is also valid for Israel and the V4, because anyway, Israel is cooperating with the V4 on both tracks, multilateral and bilateral. And I don't want to go into detail because this is not actually the subject of the lecture. We can do it some other time, but we do things together. And I think that now we are doing even more things together, and especially where take Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, where they are all considered in a low rate of countries affected by the disease. Low figures. We would like to start running talks with Hungary about the possibility of conducting a green corridor between the two countries, so we can start with flights. We are already flying to Israel. Israelis are looking for places to spend the summer, to secure safe places from the point of view of the Israeli government, of the Israeli health authorities. Hungary could be an excellent solution because Israelis like Hungary. They like to come here. Look, maybe it's not the most high-tech cooperation, it's a low-tech cooperation, but this could be an excellent cooperation because in 2019, according to the official statistics, there were around 500,000 Israelis in Hungary. It's a lot. It's a lot. We are 9-point-something millions and 500,000 entries or Israelis were here. If you can only get 50,000 to Budapest, it will change the whole vicinity. And this is what we are working on. Wizz Air is already flying to Tel Aviv and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of the prospects for cooperation, and I think it now increases it because the mutual benefit from this kind of cooperation is visible for everyone. Concerning the EU and Israel, I must say that the EU doesn't miss an opportunity and try to focus on more important issues, because when we were talking about coronavirus, and look, I've been invited to give the lecture not on political issues. We're not supposed to be talking on the peace process or on the geopolitical situation in the Middle East or Islam and the threat for Europe and so on, not because it's not important, but because right now it doesn't stand in the focus of our intention. We all have to give solutions concerning the virus. Is this assumption of mine wrong? So we need to deal with it. Now, the European Union, well, you know, in theory, yes, but they cannot resist the possibility to warn the Israeli government from whatever they were going to be to do in the future, if we would like to implement parts of the Trump deal of the century for the peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is what matters now. So luckily, Hungary is on our side, and we are always thankful for you for this kind of policy. And you managed to block it, sometimes on your own, sometimes you've been assisted by other countries. But the European Union is important. European Union is important because it's a source of, first of all, because it's the biggest economy, I think, in the world. I mean, 400 million, no, not bigger than China, but it's a big economic market, an advanced one. It's the biggest hub of research, and we contribute to it. And this is our backyard. It means that still more Israelis will go to Europe than they go to China, or to have this kind of Arctic cruise or something like this. There are two problems. The first one is that the level of trade between Israel and the EU is declining. I was also ambassador to the EU, and I was shocked to realize to what extent the Israeli industrialists are abandoning Europe. Why is this? Because, you know, someone who manufactures something he wants to buy, or he wants to sell, he wants to buy, they want to have the best deal possible. European Union is full with regulations, and cost. The price is not, you know, value for price is not very high. You go to the emerging markets in India, China, South Korea, Russia, and it's a completely different story, or the United States. So the EU is still our biggest trade partner because it's about 30% of the volume of the whole volume of trade, export, import of Israel, but it's going down, so it's important. But the problem that annoys Israelis, many Israelis, is the fact that Europe is putting more and more emphasis on the political aspects when it comes to Israel. There hasn't been a meeting of the association committee for over a decade because there's no consensus among the Europeans. There's always a problem. There's always an if and but and a pending. And this is something which used to be part and parcel of our relations. I mean, any country which has an association agreement with the EU has this once a year. Today, it's like a reward. If you do something like this, we give you that. And hypocrisy, and I know that the expressions, the terms hypocrisy, EU, in the Hungarian diplomatic jargon, it's there. Hypocrisy is celebrating. Keep putting the emphasis on this, on this, on this. Double standards. So if you ask them, financing NGOs, not that are criticizing the government. Everybody's criticizing the government in Israel. Even members of the government are criticizing, not a specific government, no, and I'm really, that's a part of our history. In my diplomatic career, I was privileged to be in lots of countries. Some of them are the cradles of democracy. And even in those cradles of democracy, there were some iron rules. First of all, a minister does not express himself in a domain which is not under his jurisdiction, which means the Minister of Health cannot express his opinion about issues of defense or foreign policy. And the second one, when you have a vote in the government, someone who votes against the government, even if you abstain, depends where. But if you vote against the government, the prime minister does not have to send you a letter of, he doesn't have to fire you. It is expected that the next day, first thing in the morning, you put a resignation letter on the prime minister's table. Not in Israel, by the way. That's a different tradition. So we're not talking about this. We're talking about you're financing organizations, civil society organizations, which are against the very existence of Israel, the way it exists. Organizations which are supporting the BDS. And they say it. I mean, it's no secret. You don't have to activate a sleeping agent somewhere to come out with this information. Everything today is on the internet. It's free for everyone. You know, just serve and you find it. We don't like these kind of things, and therefore we think that, you know, if Israel would have been financing an organization, an NGO which operates to change the nature of a European country, I don't think that it would have been received very pleasantly and rightfully so, by the European Union and its members. So in a nutshell, you can't with them, but certainly you cannot without them. We need them. I think that we need us, that they benefit from the Israeli contribution in the field of science, research. And at the end of the day, they are there to stay, and we are here to stay, and we should work together. Now, coming to talk about the membership, look, this is for the fortune tellers. I don't think that it will happen in my lifetime, and I have the intention to live for many, many years. Hopefully.
Thank you very much. Okay, the upcoming question is actually threefold, but let's just begin with the first segments. So, did Israel, like most European states, address the danger too late? I mean, the COVID pandemic danger, because Chinese social media networks are full of reports on COVID crisis already in early 2020. So, did the Israeli response was a little belated as well, just like the Europe?
Did the Israeli? No. Okay. Yes. Yeah. No, sorry.
All right. So was it?
No. On the contrary, and I indicated it in my presentation. No, there was a lot of criticism against the government and against the prime minister, and that we have taken this kind of draconic measures from the first point. More than this, they were, you know, it was also used by the private politicians, because this was right after the elections, and he was trying to form his coalition, and the opposition, they were given first amendment by the president to try and create their own government. And everybody was blaming Netanyahu that he was exaggerating the severity of the situation in order to frighten people and to force the opposition to join up with him, and or whatever, things like this. No. So there was a lot of criticism, and no, we did the right thing on the right time. We could have been even stricter, and there are people who regret why we were not that strict. And I think that the European countries that followed our path, like Hungary, look backwards and see what happened in Hungary. Look at other countries in Europe, unfortunately, what happened there. So, and if I may quote your own prime minister, who said several times that you were given, you had an advantage of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Austria was, you know, and others, so you had time to prepare yourself. That's true. So first of all, it was sheer luck, because that it didn't reach our country the first wave, and second, that we had the vision, or that to take this kind of extreme measures. By the way, the first Israeli citizens who got infected were those who were on board this Japanese cruise. Not Japanese, the cruiser that was stuck in Yokohama.
Diamond Princess.
There?
Diamond Princess.
The Diamond Princess, yes. And when they were brought to Israel after, you know, we said, there were 10 of them said, okay, that's that. No, but then it started to spread. So no, we did not act too late. On the contrary, and I think that you know, in the Israeli calendar, Jewish Israeli calendar, we had a lot of events in this period because the period, round after Passover is a very loaded one, or very heavy one, with celebrations and commemorations. Because first of all, you have the 7 days of Passover. As I said, it's a gathering, it's a family gathering, a holiday, religious holiday. Then we commemorate the Holocaust Day. Then we commemorate the Day of the Fallen Soldiers. Then we commemorate our Independence Day. So it's the most the most sensitive and most important period of 1 month in the Israeli calendar. And it means that there are a lot of public mass gatherings, like when you have the Day of the Fallen Soldiers, the military cemeteries are full with relatives, friends who come to pay their tribute to the fallen soldiers. This year, it was forbidden by an emergency regulation that nobody should go there. And or the Holocaust Memorial Day. Nothing. Everything was with Zoom. All the ceremonies were recorded in advance, and they were it's a camouflage. You think it's real, but it's not real, and you don't have audience. And these are very, very difficult days for Israelis. But still, the public was playing along, and we were ready to sacrifice this for the sake of the future. So I don't think that we did it too late. On the contrary. The second fold.
Okay, so the upcoming is about technological and intelligence capacities.
Yes.
Will it enable Israel to avoid similar emergencies in the future? And also, will this crisis lead to a bigger role of Shabak surveillance technology in the everyday life of Israeli citizens?
First of all, it's not Shabak technologies. The technologies have been developed by private entrepreneurs. Shabak uses them. But you're right. I mean, the person who poses the question is right. I mean, it raised a huge dilemma in Israel, and I mentioned it in my presentation. And we spoke about it. What is the meaning of limiting democracy? Is it allowed to limit democracy? Where are the boundaries? Those are the questions. What do you do? This was the issue that is still discussed now, by the way, because we are still implementing this device, but on a lower volume. And by the way, it has to be approved on a weekly basis by the Defense Committee of the Knesset, of our parliament. And this week, the government reduced the level of it. So the question is, what do you do? Do you interfere with the privacy of the citizens in order to prevent a catastrophe or not? It's the same question about vaccination. Do you know the people who refuse out of whatever reasons to vaccinate the children? What do? Do you allow them to go to the same kindergarten with our children who are vaccinated? And things like this. I think that it has proven itself. And the question is always not whether you introduce the technology, but rather what you do with it. And how do you have enough safety guarantees that you won't be misusing the information? Because we took a risk. People could have sued us. Someone tells his wife that today he's somewhere, and then his wife finds out indirectly because he got this text message which orders him to be in a self-quarantine, that actually on the day he told her he was in Hungary, for example, he was not in Hungary, he was in Tel Aviv somewhere doing something that he didn't want his wife to know that he was doing. Well, let our imagination work a little bit. You don't have to be too imaginative to understand what I'm talking about. And it happened. It happened. So the question is, what do you do? What is preferable? Again, it's a question which you do not have an answer about it. There's no definite answer. There's no textbook answer. Nobody can give you an answer. It's not 2 + 2 should be 4 or makes 4 usually. But I tell you one thing, and I want to repeat it because I will repeat what I just said before. The question is not what kind of measures you are introducing. The question is what kind of safety guarantees you have that you will limit it. But I would have done it because this enabled us to track down everything, or to be more thorough in tracking down the possible communities of sick people.
I see. We don't have further questions for the moment, but we don't have one, but I have my own. So, Your Excellency talked about the possible shortening of value chains in the re-implementations of some of the manufacturing in Israel, and about the decisions to give up all those manufacturing because it was no longer profitable. Do you see that now we are entering a time of health emergency, so those industries need to be relocated to Israel again? Or you see that there is a logic of the market behind all this, and so if it would still be more profitable to manufacture them elsewhere, then the companies would not relocate them?
Again, I cannot go into the details because I don't know. I mean, it could be individual about this product or that product, but something is very clear. Our basic assumption, as far as I know, it's your assumption as well, that it ain't over yet. Maybe it's round 1 is over and we won. There might be round 2, 3, and round 2 and 3, the very question whether they will happen, or, and more particular, what will be the volume or the magnitude of it, depends on how we prepare ourselves. So, for example, everybody was panicked. We gave orders for the manufacturing of about 8,000, at least 8,000 ventilating machines, because this was the expert in the Ministry of Health who said, "Now, well, that's what we need," because they were talking, and again, I don't know whether they did it on purpose to panic us or not. They were talking about 10,000 fatalities, 1 million infected, 10,000 fatalities, and now it all goes to statistics. If you have 1 million people who are infected, then a certain percentage of them will need to be ventilated. So how many machines do you need? To the best of my knowledge, the government has decided, by the way, in the peak of this, I think that we had no more than 90 something people that were ventilated. There are more, people tend to forget that apart from corona, there are other diseases in the world, some of them much more threatening and serious. So there were other people who unfortunately had to be ventilated by those machines. They do it on an ordinary basis. My wife works, she works at the intensive care unit in one of the biggest hospital in Israel. She can tell you all about this ventilating machines. But we talk about corona, there were about 90 odd people who needed to be, the machine was, so you can ask, what the hell do we need 8,000? I think that in your case, it's the same figure.
Slightly lower, I think.
Slightly lower, but no, I think the same, and I think that's not a mistake. That's what the experts are talking about. That's again their calculation. I don't want. I think that I don't know, and you don't know. But that's it. But the principle is that you stick to the intention. Like now, it seems that for the time being, it's being contained. The basic assumption that will come back, so we need to prepare ourselves. We have time to prepare ourselves. Now, whether we go back to manufacture everything in Israel, I don't think so. But of course, we'll have to take into consideration maybe to get in touch in small partnerships. By the way, the gentleman or the lady who were asking about cooperation, I think that this is a good idea. That some things that we can decide, Israel and Hungary, or Israel and the V4, that okay, we distribute the work. You do this, I do that. Provided, of course, that we are committed that it's for our use, not for others. So this kind of partnerships are a good chance to do things. By the way, we have also, we means everyone, you included, we have a problem of unemployment. You know, in Israel, like in Hungary, before it all started, unemployment rate was 3 point something, but you know, 3 point something, everything less than 4% is actually not zero. Why? Because it includes, you know, it includes also people who are on leave, maternity leave. They change profession. They go from one city to the other, and so on. And within days, the rate became 25%. It hasn't recovered yet. It will take time, but more than this, even if the economy goes back to the capacities before the crisis, in Hungary, Israel, wherever, you will still have unemployment. Why? Because owners of factories, or they've suddenly discovered that if they thought that the work that they do can only be done if you have minimum of, let's say, 100 workers, suddenly you find out that you could do the same work, the same productivity with 95. Here it's, by the way, there is to the best of my knowledge, here is the same. I mean, we are not inventing, nobody is reinventing a wheel here. That was already invented ages ago. Similar, I mean, we are both members of the OECD, we are both developed countries. It's the similar problems of all these countries. Unemployment will stay somewhere where it was not before, because even if you go back to the figures before, which you will not, it will take time. But let's say that after 6 months, you will forget that we will forget that we ever experienced it. Still, it will require less workers. So what do you do with them? You need to find a solution. If you keep giving them unemployment rate, a pension, nothing is going to come out of it. And usually those people are skilled people, highly educated, but they are not required, the services are not required anymore. So it's a problem, and we will have to find a solution. One of the solutions could be joining efforts together and manufacturing things that you cannot. I think that also in Hungary it's now very clear. You cannot depend anymore so much only on other countries, because you had also a problem with not having gloves, not having this, not having that. Because why do you need gloves? In normal day life, who needs the gloves or the mask or disinfection, the alcohol gel? Alcohol gel, you know. By the way, in Israel, there is a big factory which manufactures alcohol gel. The government issued a special regulation which forced them to freeze the prices in order not to try and make this kind of huge income, you know, to increase prices, because it's a demand and offer. So now it was forbidden by law, by regulation, not by law. As I told you, there was no parliament, and even if there was a parliament, it was too slow. The Ministry of the Economy, they issued a decree which said that alcohol gel prices are protected. You cannot change them. Yes, next question.
Yes, the next one is, Your Excellency, thank you for pointing out the value of ad hoc bilateral and small multilateral partnerships. What should we think of permanent multilateral frameworks such as the WHO? Should they be reformed? WHO, the World Health Organization.
Should they what?
Should they be reformed?
I think that the big problem of international organizations, UN agencies included, is the fact that they were politicized everywhere. The moment you have regional groups, the moment you have thematic groups, pressure groups, which it creates a problem. Those are organizations that you have to have the best quality of people in this domain running the show, which is true. They have the best people there. The problem is that the show is being run by politicians, and you have political calculations. And this is the problem. And if the accusations are true, I don't know, but the accusations were, and this is why the United States suspended its financing of the organization. If the accusations that WHO were playing along with the Chinese government in attempts to delay and water down the magnitude of what was going on there, then we all do face a big problem. But again, as I said, if, I don't know, nobody knows, or maybe people do know, I don't know if the accusations are true or not, but what is very obvious and known to me as a career diplomat is that the UN is infected with politics, or almost all the agencies are infected with politics. And sometimes you still find an organization which deals by, only on pure professional issues, even in climate change that I was dealing with in 2 years before coming here. You find more and more attempts to politicize it. I mean, even when you talk about climate change, let's say, you talk about the Paris Agreement, the implementation, the concretization, and then implementation. And I was involved in it. And we don't play a role. We are nothing. I mean, we do not. With all the due respect to ourselves, and we have a lot of respect for ourselves, and with all due respect to our industry, we are not polluting the world. It's nothing. It's 0.0000 whatever percent of the world pollution. But we are part of the world with the international community. And you find you're following the negotiation, you're participating there. And we are talking about an imminent danger, because talk about small island states in the Pacific that are about to disappear. Maldives, Vanuatu, it's
yeah, Vanuatu, yes.
Yeah, it's disappearing. And they cry out for help. And yet you see that the negotiation is running according to the old geopolitical division of the past. You have the G77 plus China, you have the West, you have Africa, you have the poorest, the easiest, the largest, whatever. And they're still trying to deal these imminent modern problems with old politics. And this is politics. It's politics taking over everything. I mean, politics is interest. So you have a problem with the organizations. And as I said, you may have, and you certainly do have, the best experts in each domain. Food guarantees or whatever, or whatever organization or agency you name. But the problem is that at the end of the day, there is some kind of political shadow, and they tell you, okay, I mean, those who have the money, they call the shots, and they tell you what to do here, what to do there. And this is unfortunate, but again, I don't know about what happened. And again, the WHO have their own regulations. Now, I must say that some of the regulations or some of the recommendations were sometimes contradicting each other. Should you be using mask or shouldn't you be using mask, and things like this. I give people the benefit of the doubt unless proven otherwise, and I tend to believe that the conflict or contradiction was because people really didn't have the faintest idea, is mask good or bad? And in some cases where you did not have enough masks or gloves, so no government was going to recommend to its citizen to use to wear masks as low, and there's no stock of masks. Could you imagine what kind of panic would have erupted? But the moment you can put your hands on a big enough stock of gloves and masks, suddenly you tell people, oh, very highly recommended. I'm talking in theory, but not only in theory. So you never know. But needless to say that I believe that WHO, I know the Israelis who are working there, and we are members of the board, of the bureau, the board now. First class people in the all domains of medicine, usually epidemiologists and so on, but others, all kinds of experts. And I know from my personal knowledge, there's a lot of appreciation to the Israeli abilities. But again, it starts and ends with the professional qualities. But then you have the, as I said before, yeah.
I think by virtue of a last question, I would pose one myself. So, can you, Mr. Ambassador, tell something promising about the future of tourism? Because it was named as one of the key fields where Hungary and Israel are connected very deeply.
You were cut off. I can't. Can you start from the beginning? I didn't understand.
Something promising about the return of tourism to Israel, for pilgrims, tourists, businessmen. So when will be, in your view, this very good relationship in tourism industry be reinstated between the countries?
It's difficult to say. First of all, you have countries in different categories. The question is also to what extent, how much is a country affected already by the infection. I don't imagine that people would like to go to places where the disease was so spread, and because then who knows what. People are afraid and people fear, and this is understandable. What can you do? At the end of the day, we all want to live and be healthy, so sometimes we are afraid. I can tell you one thing. I don't know when will it go back to the magnitude it used to be. I hope rather sooner than later. But one thing is very clear: it is inevitable. It is inevitable because you cannot lock people too much or too long time. People lose their patience, and at the end of the day, look, even in Hungary, I would believe, the more time elapses, the less patience the people have, let alone Israel. As I said before, we are completely different by nature from you. Okay? Everything we are being told, we start arguing, because the basic assumption is that if the government tells you something, it's wrong, must be wrong, or something like this. But I believe that if things continue going like this, it will happen. And by the way, another thing, the health system people, if they would have if this would have depended on them, we would have been in curfew for the next 10 years, because this probably would have guaranteed completely that the disease will not come back. It's not their job to be responsible of, feeding the people, the economy, security, other consequences. From their point to education, from their point to, there's a lady in Israel. She is the head of the public service division at the Ministry of Health. She is not a very popular person among Israelis, because she's identified with no. Everything you ask her, the question, you start with no, but let's see. From her point of view, schools should not have been, kindergartens and schools should not have been opened until next year, if at all. The academic year came to an end. It's online, but no, the campuses are not open, and they will not be open. But then again, because June is always the end of the academic year. Buses, no buses, nothing. We had for several weeks no buses. So from their point of view, they couldn't care less. You can put people in quarantine for the next 10 years. Thanks. thanks God, they don't have the last word. And then comes the government, and the government has to take the political calculation, but also the economic calculation. And safety of the people, and by the way, we tend sometimes to forget, as I mentioned before, that maybe the coronavirus is something which is acoustic now, but it's not the only disease. And in Israel, for example, we know now that many people, the personal health situation was worsened because they didn't take care on their own problems, other problems, because they were afraid to address the public health service. Like they were afraid to go to the hospitals. You know, in Israel, hospitals were empty. In Israel, there's a big problem of capacity of hospitals. We are in the last place, I think, or one before the last in the OECD OECD list of beds per capita. You know, there were appeals by the directors of the big hospitals to the public to come, because people stayed at home, especially those who are considered to be part of this risk group. They were afraid to go because they were afraid to be infected by the virus. So you have to think about this as well. You cannot stop everything because of the virus. You know, it's like someone who keeps reading all these kind of recommendations of experts, what thou shall eat and what thou shall not eat, because everything you eat apparently affects something in your body. At the end of the day, you die out of starvation. Thank you.
It's good that they don't have the final words in everything. So that's the takeaway. It's slightly promising. Thank you. I think our time is up. So if I may close this session, then I do. Thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure from our part, and we really hope that we'll have opportunities to welcome you in similar sessions in the future, hopefully to old school personal appearance meetings as well, as you know, the emergency will slowly wither away, hopefully. And thank you very much for all who follow this event and who follow our events and us on social media, keep their habits and stay tuned for other contents to come. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, again, and thank you for your attention. Goodbye.
Thank you.